Pokemon Scarlet and Violet released worldwide on November 18th, and with reports of glitches and badly animating windmills, it should come as no surprise that speedrunners were highly optimistic about breaking the game. Despite finding some promising glitches, the game remains relatively unbroken, and today we'll be looking at the different ways they've tried to break the game, the few successes they've had, and if it's even possible to break the game at all. I hope you enjoyed today's video. We all know that outside of speedrunning, glitches and performance are a big deal, and if you want a top-performing browser, then this video's sponsor has you covered. Opera GX is a great browser for gamers as it comes with Discord and Spotify integrations located on the sidebar that makes chatting with friends and switching music incredibly easy. And if you're not a Spotify user, that's not a problem, as it's fully compatible with Apple and YouTube Music. If you're like me and have dozens of browser tabs open, Opera GX is fantastic at managing performance, as the GX Control tab lets you decide how much CPU and RAM you want the browser to be using. And if that's not enough, you can limit the bandwidth it uses while you game or stream, helping your sessions to be lag-free. If a tab is becoming too resource-intensive, all it takes is a simple click to get things back in line. And if you're in need of a mobile browser, check out GX Mobile, the perfect companion to Opera, as it allows you to send files and links between the two with a single click. Join the millions of gamers optimizing their setup with the Opera GX browser. Throw resource-hungry browsers away and click with confidence with Opera GX. Thanks to Opera for sponsoring this video. And with that, let's get into the video. To understand how to break the game, we need to know what's required to beat it, and Gen 9 has a lot of mandatory content for players to complete. In line with its predecessors, you need to collect 8 badges from gym leaders that will give you access to the Elite Four and the final rival battle. In most generations, this would be the end of the game, but Gen 9 features 3 main quest lines players need to complete. Victory Road, which is the gym leader line, Path of Legends, which involves beating Titan Pokemon to unlock better cooking ingredients, and Starfall Street, which requires beating this gen's villainous group, Team Star. Once those quest lines are complete, the previous restricted Paldea Crater opens up to you, and you're able to challenge the endgame boss. The game is open world, so players are free to do the quest lines in the order they prefer, but before any major skips can be attempted or researched, we have the problem of getting through the tutorial. The tutorial gets players familiar with how to battle and catch Pokemon and sets up the different quest lines you can explore, but it's very tedious and time-consuming, with speedrunners taking just over 50 minutes to get through it before they have access to the true open world. The tutorial can be broken down into 5 different stages: picking your starter, learning how to battle, learning how to catch Pokemon, getting a taste of the open world, and arriving at school. If we start at the beginning with selecting a starter, we see the first thing speedrunners do is turn off cutscenes, a free skip courtesy of the developers. After an unskippable cutscene, you're shown the 3 starters this gen offers, and then the game makes the huge mistake of giving the player some freedom before you have to make the selection. And 2 days after release, the creator of Doki Doki Literature Club, Dan Salvato, would discover a way to get out of bounds in this segment. The cliff bordering the area has a fence that blocks you from getting out of bounds, but Dan positioned his character near a rock, then used a running slide to nudge his way to the top and past the rock, effectively getting out of bounds. A slide happens when you press B while running. It's a transition animation that plays when you go from running to sneaking, and we'll see it again later in the video. And now that we've used one to get out of bounds, what can we do? At this spot, there isn't much. You can pick up some items behind your mom's house and get down to a beach, but other than that, you can't get anywhere useful that progresses the story. However, another player by the name of Valyssa would discover a way that did get you out of the tutorial before picking a starter. If you get under the overhang of this rock, save, then restart the game, when you reload, the game can place you on top of the rock, which lets you bypass selecting a starter and move deeper into the tutorial. Speedrunners rejoiced, as the quickest way out of the tutorial had been found, but it didn't last long because one big problem stared them in the face. If you went into battle without a Pokemon, the game would crash. For now, this remains in the cool trick part of the toolbox. It looked as though you needed to get a starter before any sequence breaking could happen, so that's what they did. After picking a starter, the game gives you a little bit of freedom to explore your immediate area. There hasn't been a skip found for this segment yet, so the first thing runners do is complete the tutorial battle with Nemona. Once this is finished, you're taken to a path that leads to the lighthouse and are given a tutorial on how to catch Pokemon, then given some more freedom before you continue. This would prove to be a tragic mistake on the developer's part, because in this section, Dan found a way to get out of bounds. By running in circles at the gap between two portions of fence, you can get pushed between them. This lets you re-enter the cave where you get the legendary bicycle Pokemon earlier in the tutorial, and if you go the whole way through the cave, you can bypass the lighthouse and go straight to school. But this also has a problem. When Dan arrived at school, he was greeted with the message no speedrunner ever wants to see. You can head this way later. To ensure you've played through all of the tutorials, the developers included a check that verifies if you've completed the proper story flags, and in this case, Nemona is still waiting for you at the lighthouse, so the school remains locked. This was a problem, as it meant a sequence break found before the tutorial was completed wouldn't be usable in a speedrun, so players once again shifted their focus. Instead of trying to break out in the first 3 sections of the tutorial, they completed the story flag to move Nemona to the school and got to work on the next area. After you're finished at the lighthouse, you're told to make your way to the academy, and you're given freedom to explore a vertical slice of the open world on your way there. It's bordered by mountains, an ocean, and some gates, so you're forced to go to school eventually in order to progress. But this only served to motivate speedrunners to break it all the more. Armed with a starter, you no longer have to worry about crashing the game, so it's possible to make progress if you can find a way outside of this mini open world segment, and that's just what happened. Dan Salvato would once again find a way out, this time using a dash slide to get up an unclimbable cliff to break into the full open world of the game. The developers' attempts to keep the player gated were literally dashed. This wasn't the only way out, however, and if we look at the battle system, I think you can guess what the next method of escape did. When you throw a Pokeball at a wild Pokemon to initiate a battle, the game will teleport you to a different location in order to set up the camera for the battle. This has been used to get to islands before getting the ability to surf, letting players collect items before they were intended to. And runner AeonFrodo theorized that if you could get close to an area outside of the gated open world and initiate a battle, that the game would teleport you outside of the gated area when setting up the battle. And that's precisely what happened. When she crept close to the edge of a cliff and targeted a Toxel across the gap, the game indeed ported her outside of the tutorial area to start the battle. And when it was complete, she was free to explore the rest of the world, skipping the final section of the tutorial where you go to school. With 2 ways out of the longest tutorial in speedrunning, you're probably wondering where they go first. And the answer is back to the drawing board to try again, because the game had other plans for would-be sequence breakers. Eager to start smashing gyms and collecting badges, speedrunners were surprised to find out that gyms and bosses wouldn't trigger if you broke out of the tutorial. Everything appeared to be tied to arriving at school and finishing the early game. This forced them to go to school, meaning that every part of the tutorial had to be played. But since they were in the full world early, they could at least catch a high-level Pokemon to make the game easy, right? Wrong. Gen 9 keeps the obedience system from previous generations, so if you catch a wild Pokemon that's level is above your current obedience threshold, it won't listen to you. So even if you can catch a level 50 Leafeon, it won't obey you until you have the required badges. You could power level your starter while in the full open world, but leaving the tutorial to grind only to come back and finish the school section certainly isn't faster. It looked as though the tutorial was a solid unbreakable sequence, so speedrunners turned their attention to the open world, and there were some discoveries. In a shocking turn of events, someone posted a video to Reddit where they had connected 2 left Joy-Cons to the Switch in handheld mode, and by pressing the same angle on each Joy-Con, the player's run speed was greatly increased. It didn't stack with the bike, however, which is faster than this glitch on its own, and glitches that require extra hardware are typically banned in most speedruns, so this wouldn't be helpful anyway. But players quickly turn their attention to the endgame content and getting inside of the Elite Four building, and surprisingly, you can get in without any badges. There's a guard that checks your badge count before granting you access to the building, but a way inside was found if you have 0 badges. Unfortunately, there's an interview you need to pass where your badge count is checked again, with you getting kicked out if you're short on badges. And if you have any theories as to why they included 2 badge checks, let me know down below. The developers really took care in ensuring that players completed everything, but the game doesn't end if you beat the Elite Four. There's an endgame area that contains the final trainer battle before the credits, and it's located inside of Paldea Crater. This area is sealed off by a door, and runners theorized that if you clip through the door somehow, that you could proceed to the endgame area. And they were right. Valyssa would be messing around with the climb mechanic under the building the door is located in, and surprisingly, she clipped right into the structure. After a bit, she fell at a weird angle, and the game respawned her inside of the closed door. And the loading zone that took her to the control room, surprisingly, was present. However, nothing inside of the control room worked, so she couldn't progress to the next room where you make the descent into the crater. Once again, the game required certain events to be completed before progress could be made. This didn't deter her, and she had an idea. If she couldn't get into the descent room normally, what if she tried clipping into it from the outside? After some attempts, she made it in, but the developers refused to leave any sequence breaks for speedrunners, and she discovered that the cutscene trigger wasn't active, as it only gets turned on if you have completed the 3 main quest lines. For the time being, the community's attempts at a sequence break were as stuck as Valyssa's character. There is another door later in the endgame sequence, and while looking for ways to glitch into it, runner shenanigans would try using a dash slide.
Good I am at getting... Wait, I have a weirder idea.
Just like every other sequence break, the developers had taken out the loading zone until the prerequisites were met. Even late in the game, they were firm in players doing things their way. The history of sequence breaks is quite doom and gloom, as it looks to be a very solid game, but there are glitches that runners use in the run to help save time, with one of them taking inspiration from Super Mario 64. Backwards long jumps are used in Super Mario 64 to get through star doors without meeting the prerequisites to open them. But in Scarlet and Violet, they're used to get up cliffs that are normally too steep to navigate. For some reason, when you jump in a negative direction, the game is more forgiving on keeping you grounded when you land on a slope. And using this trick, you can climb to locations you normally can't access without the rock climb ability. There's one particular place in the run that they see use, and that's for elevator skip when you're going into Cascarafa City. Normally, you're required to ride an elevator up to the higher levels of the city, and this takes time as it plays a small cutscene every time you do it. But with backwards long jumps, you can climb some cliffs outside the city to bypass this process for a convenient time save. BLJs are the only glitch that are currently used in the run, as all of the sequence breaks discovered have been thwarted by the developers' inclusion of a flag-based progression system. It was just like Pokemon Legends Arceus all over again. Any sequence break was hard-coded not to be viable. Unlike Sonic Frontiers, the developers at Game Freak really put effort into making sure you couldn't sequence break or miss any events in the game that they wanted you to play. And maybe all the time spent on preventing sequence breaks is why the 25-year-old windmill from Ocarina of Time animates better. For the time being, the speedrun is routed around some core Pokemon that clear the 3 main quests in the most efficient order, with runs clocking in just under 6 hours. And in case you were wondering, Quaxly is the best starter for the run. Sorry, Fire Alligator fans. Be sure to check out Eddaket and Valyssa, as the video wouldn't have been possible without their help. If you want to support the channel, consider subscribing to my Patreon, where I've just posted some new goals. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.